social effectively and cost effectively, brought to you by LiveWorld. I'm Naomi Alston, part of the ProcureCon Event Series team, and I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to today's speaker. Joining us, we have Peter Friedman. Peter is a social media visionary and veteran with 30 years experience in the space, 18 at LiveWorld and 12 at Apple. He's provided multiple global brands with strategic social media guidance and delivered hundreds of social media programs for them in multiple countries and languages. These include Apple's industry-wide social network, Apple Link, Mini Cooper's Members Lounge, Unilever's Dove campaign for Real Beauty, HBO's original show character-driven website Community, the American Express Members Project, and Walmart's Facebook and Twitter programs. So big welcome to Peter. We're excited to hear from you today. And before I pass you over, I just want to mention that we will be doing a Q&A at the end. So please feel free to submit questions throughout using the questions tab on your control panel, and we'll try and get through as many of them as possible. And lastly, we will be sending you the recorded webinar and slide deck, and you can expect to receive that via email within 24 to 48 hours after the webinar. So with that, I'd like to pass you over to Peter.
Thanks very much, Naomi, and I'm glad to be here. Today, I'm going to be talking about social media, how to do it effectively and cost-effectively at the same time. And since our audience is mostly digital procurement managers, I'm going to be focusing on what does this mean to you and how can you take this information and have an impact on your company, both in terms of scaling costs but also adding value. I'm going to begin with what social media is, because lots of people talk about it different ways, then go on to ROI and some best practices, and then 2 case studies to illustrate what we're talking about today. To start with, social media is really quite big. This is why it's so important. The volume is incredible, and this is just a small sampling of the number of things that go on just like in 1 minute. So you've heard of a New York minute. This is a social media minute with volume all over. It's actually getting bigger and bigger every day. And when we look at it, we look at why are the budgets getting big and where's everybody going. It's not just the volume, but it's because it's where the customer's eyeballs have gone. And they're moving here more and more. Some people talk about so many people are using it, 1.5 billion people on Facebook alone, and there's hundreds of millions on Twitter and Pinterest, and then there's other services around the world. But it's actually going to get bigger, partly because there will be even more people using it, and because the amount of usage per person is going to continue to rise, and eventually will be much greater than all of the media forms. But even more important than the fact that their eyeballs are there, it's where their ears, minds, and hearts are. And this is just one study that shows that people trust what other people they know have to say more than anything else. So the very number one thing on this chart is recommendations from other people I know, and then the second is just anybody's opinions posted online, and then it drops way down from there. And this is because who do we trust the most? People we know, people like us, our friends, what they've said, what their experiences are. We trust that much more than other forms of marketing and messages coming from us. So what is social media? Well, it's really a social medium. It's about dialogue and relationships, first among your customers and then the brand with customers. This is what it's all about, how people talk to each other, form relationships, and then what kind of value can be created from that. Customers get 3 benefits from social media. First, they get the opportunity to share and express themselves. Second, they make friends. And third, they get attention. And it's very, very important to understand these are the core benefits that consumers get from social media. It isn't, coupons, it isn't product information. It's these 3 things. So as a brand, you have to look at how am I giving them these benefits. If you're not giving them one and preferably all 3 of these benefits, then you're not really leveraging the power of the channel. You can give them coupons and information. That can be good too. But you really want to focus on, are these programs doing this? So as a procurement manager, when you're helping your clients, the first thing you want to say is this program being constructed in a way, is the budget we're spending delivering these things to customers? If not, maybe we should rethink it. Now, if it's a B2B company, it's really the same things, but we take those 3 benefits and put them in business terms. Instead of express myself, it's share and collaborate information. Instead of making friends, it's building a professional network of friends. Instead of attention, it's recognition and status in my peer industry group, And in my company, how's it going to help my job? So it's really the same core benefits, but you adjust them a little differently if it's a B2B company. Now, if you're the brand, what are you getting out of it? Well, there's quite a bit a brand gets from it. Marketing, awareness, word of mouth, loyalty, build relationships. Yes, you can actually drive sales both in terms of short-term impulse sales and restructuring your relationship with customers for more revenue over the life cycle of the customer. Social media can be used to drive higher levels of customer satisfaction at lower costs to do it. And one of the most powerful benefits for brands is what you learn, because you're actually able to see what your customers are saying and thinking and figure out what to do about it. Now, there's other benefits for brands. You can drive short-term actions. You can offer discounts, drive people to a store or product, things like that. That's good too, but that's not the main thing you do with it. That's sort of a supporting element, because you can do that in other media forms as well. Social media is not free, but it is the most cost-effective form of marketing. And the reason for that is that you're leveraging your customers. The more you get your customers involved with each other and with you through social media, the more they're speaking for you, which again is the most powerful form of influence. So the sort of exponential network effects of social media let you reach more people and go deeper for less money than you would in other media forms. It's a great deal of leverage, and it allows you to do it more personally and socially than other media forms do, which are essentially broadcast-oriented. So speaking of cost effectiveness, let's talk about ROI. Now, a lot of people get up in the world of social media and say, oh, don't look at ROI. This is a fuzzy medium. It's too new. You can't really do it. Look at the feelings you generate and all that. And, well, feelings are good, but we're doing this for business reasons, and it's just like total BS that you can't have ROI. You can have ROI, and you should manage it for ROI. Now, it is new, and it is developing, and the models are rough, but it is there, and I'm going to speak about just 5 of the ROI models, but there are more. To start with, social media statistics. This would be things like likes, followers, engagement metrics of different types. Here, we really like engagement metrics more. You have to build up a lot of fans and followers and likes. You do have to do that, but that in itself doesn't get you anything. You really have to say, how am I going to engage people so that they're actually paying attention? Am I able to get business results? So we had one client who tasked their agency, the digital agency, to build their Facebook fan base from 2,000 to 100,000 in 90 days. And I looked at the digital marketing manager at this very big company. I said, and what are you going to do with those fans once you get them? And she paused and said, well, that's a good question. How come my agency didn't bring that up? Because you need to do something with them. So here, rather than just likes, you have to get fans, you really want to look at engagement. And it would be better to get, say, 100,000 fans that you went deeply engaging with than to get 1 million or 10 million you didn't do anything with. So we like engagement per person. We also like how are you retaining these people? That's a new metric that people are looking at. Are they coming back? And even in engagement, you want to look at different types. It's one thing to like a post. It's more involvement if you share that post. It's even more involvement if you comment on it. And the more involvement you get, the more commitment you get, which leads us to our other forms of ROI. But before we get to those, let's go to marketing statistics. These are traditional marketing statistics, reach, awareness, that type of thing. And you can really build that. All you have to do is track how many people you're reaching. And one particular way we like to do this is what we call marketing equivalency, which we borrow from the PR world, who everybody said, well, am I getting any results here? And what you do in marketing equivalency is you measure your reach or your awareness and then say, how much would that cost me to do if I was using a more traditional advertising? And there's your ROI. So this is an actual example with one of our clients where we ran a program for them on Twitter, and the total cost of the program was about $200,000. And then we analyzed how many people did we reach and how many was it like broad, and what would be a low CPM that would cost us to get a broad set of people, and then where did we actually directly interact with people on a more targeted basis that would warrant a higher CPM, and where did we have long conversations that would be the equivalent to a sales call. And then we compared all that to what those things would cost, the CPMs and regular advertising and things. And we found that to reach the same number of people with that level of targeting and interaction would have cost $2 million compared to the $200,000 here. So that was a 10 times ROI. We effectively saved that company $1.8 million of spending in other media forms. And we suggested to our social media client group, we'll take that $1.8 million to your CMO and CEO and say, we saved $1.8 million in reallocation of marketing budgets. So how about let us have another $800,000 for our social media program and take the other $1 million and do that something else you want with that, maybe profit. So this is a really tangible, simple way that you can work with the CMO and say, let's look at our marketing budget, but not just at a couple of million, but tens of millions of dollars, and say if we reallocate money into social media and measure marketing equivalency, we can both fund the social media program and save money for other uses in marketing or give back to the CEO for other investments or profit. Number 3, insight. As I mentioned earlier, this can be the most powerful kind. For decades and decades, we've been using other market research methodologies, surveys, psychographics, demographics, behavioral graphics, all these things. But they're all really proxying for what are people actually saying and thinking. And in social media, it's right in front of you. And we have a number of ways today of tracking that. Sometimes we use software. Sometimes we use moderators who can judge human nuance a little better and see what you can learn. So what's the value of an insight that you didn't know? Let me give you an example. A bunch of years ago, we did a social web listening program for Sun Microsystems. And this was for their developer tools group, who, along with IBM and Microsoft, were all in a race developing open source development tools of a certain kind. So we went out on the web and we listened to what developers were actually talking about in open source discussion forums. And what we found was very interesting. None of them were talking about the tools that Sun, Microsoft, and IBM were all in a race to build. These developers were talking about a completely different set of tools. And we were able to bring this information back to Sun, who reallocated their budget and strategy to the tools the developers were actually interested in, and that vaulted them in front of both Microsoft and IBM in that market and built an entire business for them. So that isn't just an insight to tweak the social media program or improve marketing, but fundamentally change their product mix. We have another client who altered how they were handling produce in their grocery business, and not only found that they had to change their market messaging based on talking to customers through social media, but changed the actual product mix, the distribution chain, how they source things. So they used this insight to alter and reverse a declining in share to an increase in market share. Number 4, relationship building. So social media is all about relationships. How do you make friends with your customers and they make friends with you, having made friends with each other? And just for actual statistics on this, American Express did a study at the end of 2012 that showed a positive customer support experience on social media caused the customer to tell 43 other people. A negative caused them to tell 52 other people. That's a 95-point word-of-mouth marketing spread. The positive people were building a positive relationship with the brand, the negative in just the opposite relationship direction. Which brings us to revenue. We all want revenue. Generally, when we talk with our clients on a social media program, we first say, okay, what business are we in and what do we want to do? And usually it's sell stuff. Well, you can definitely increase revenue in social media. And we have examples. In that same study, American Express showed that the people having a positive experience spent 21% more with the brand. And a couple of years ago, Mr. Youth, an agency, did a study of holiday social media and found that for retailers, 80% of social media interactions resulted in a transaction. And various other companies have tracked that. And there's more ways you can track this. In traditional media, you don't really know if somebody's buying something because of a TV ad. What you do is pre- and post-testing, and you do A/B testing to see who saw the ad versus who didn't and who bought what. And we can do the same thing in social media, and except it's easier because it's on the web and you can track things and do A/B testing easier. And I think this is kind of new for social media, and I've discovered the main reason it isn't happening a lot is apparently the people who know how to do this testing in your companies and in agencies sit on a different floor than where the social media marketing people are. So one of the things you all can do is when you go back to your offices after this webinar is go find those people who do that A/B testing for TV and print and have a meeting with them and your social media marketing people and do the same thing, and you'll be able to track it just as well. But I think you'll see faster results happening sooner. So now that we've talked about ROI, I'd like to talk about some best practices for social media that will support that ROI, and again, with an eye on how can we in the procurement area of the company really influence this and help the company and our clients within the company use social media to be more effective in their marketing and do it cost effectively. Number one, as we said, it's about dialogue and relationships. You have to be looking at how is a social media catalyzing, generating, leveraging dialogue among your customers that then builds relationships. Most social media marketing today is not truly social. It's traditional advertising, digital and PR, broadcast message shoved through social channels at customers. So the first thing you want to do is when you're working with your clients, say, hey, is this social media program spending a huge amount of money on a bunch of advertising development and graphics and things like that that the customers in social media aren't going to really pay attention to a lot, or at least it won't build a long-term thing? Or are we focusing the money on how do we build a conversation relationship among customers, which is what social media is best for? Number two, have a dedicated social media team. And you'll notice nobody in this picture is an intern. Now, we like social media interns, but these are big, important programs. And interns can bring a lot to your program, but you wouldn't have an intern handle your whole TV program, so they can contribute, but you need people who know about marketing and some senior people who are working on this, at least one person. It's too involved to not have that type of focus, and you'll find very quickly there's so much to do that that person will get overwhelmed. Now, we're both a services and a software company, so we manage and run social media for our clients, but we tell them they have to have somebody inside to be doing it. We had one client who told us they had money, they didn't have people, and we said, but you need somebody, and they said, we have money, not people. So we finally agreed that if they would budget 3/4 of a person, we would be their inside person, but they had to give us a desk so we could actually embed that person in the company, because that person needs to know the products and the other people. They don't have to do all the social media frontline work. An agency such as ours can do that and really know the brand's voice, but they have to know the company, and they have to be the one that knows the strategy of the company and coordinate and integrate everybody else inside it. Number three, set goals. The first way to get an ROI is to sit down and write down the goals. Like I said earlier, usually most of our clients want to sell stuff. That's a good goal. Write it down. Maybe you want to build awareness. Maybe you want to change your positioning, or you want to do better customer support, or you want to learn something. We should write down these goals. What are the business goals? And then next to it, we say, okay, so what are the social media goals, and what are KPIs we'll measure this with? Now, it's an evolving, changing program, so you may not meet them, but at least you'll have those KPIs as a reference point, and then you can measure how you're doing over time. Number four is to develop a social brand identity, a sense of what the company is in the market. This is a framework we've developed, and you want to think about your brand as having a cultural model. For example, IBM once famously said Apple's marketing was a mix of brand and culture. And really what Apple does, what Starbucks does, is they're not thinking of their marketing as a product experience, but as a people experience, a human experience. And that's what social media does for you. And the way to approach this is to say, what is our company all about? How are we, what are the values, what's the context we want to create? And that's our cultural model. And then work through how will the brand participate? Because the best thing a brand can do is bring forward its own people to participate. And then how will this be integrated with the rest of the social media, rest of the marketing mix? Number five, and this is about topic mix. So one way to think about culture from the prior slide is your social media presence is your online party. What kind of a party are you going to throw? And if you went to a party and the host stood up and just talked about himself, you probably wouldn't like that. But that's what we mostly do when we get to social media. We're used to talking about ourselves, and that's what TV and print are. So most brands follow this ratio. 80%, maybe 100% of their posts are about the product and the brand. And very few are about what we call category or social. So as an example, let's say we're selling barbecues. And if I said, a post that said, here's my Weber barbecue, $99, that's about the brand and the product. But if we put up a post that said, do you like gas or grill, that's more about the category. And that's actually a little more interesting to people. If you put up a post that said, on 4th of July at my barbecue, we're going to blank, that's social. That's more about the people and their lives. But most companies don't do that. They mostly want to talk about themselves, and you kind of understand that. But in social media, that's not the best practice. The best practice is to be 80% social category and talk about yourself only 20% of the time. Back to my party metaphor, if you went to a party and the host, that's the brand, stood up and talked about himself all night, you get bored. You go, boy, this guy's got a big ego. I'm not going to any more of his parties. But if there were other interesting people there and lots of topics to talk about, and you networked around and you had a good time, you go, boy, this host, this brand throws a great party. I'm going to keep coming back to this brand's party, and I'm going to bring my friends. And though it's a little counterintuitive, by talking less about yourself and about your brand, you'll attract more people who will see your brand posts. So if you have 100 posts and 80 of them are about yourself, about your product and brand, you're not going to get a lot of people. But if you have 20 about your brand and 80 about social and category things, a lot more people will come, and a lot more people will see those 20 brand posts than would have seen the 80. And this is just people's social behavior. It's further intensified by algorithms in the social networks, such as Facebook's EdgeRank algorithm, which actually drives content postings visibility based on social behavior. Number 6, 360-degree social thinking. Ultimately, social media will be both a platform and context for all your marketing and much of your business. Your customers will experience your brands more through social media than any other form of marketing or even the product. Why? Because it's a deep, emotional, people-to-people experience. They're going to experience your messaging through their friends, which they hold on to more. In order for that to work, you really have to integrate it with everything you're doing, but you want to do this by having best-of-breed people. You want to have the best TV people, the best digital people, the best social people, and then the brand has to be the grand integrator of it all. Don't rely on some other agency that says they can do everything to integrate it all. You really need to do that because it's your customer's brand experience that will mostly be driven through social. Number 7, this is not a build it and they will come media form. It's pretty noisy, it's pretty crowded, it's billions of people and many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of brands, lots of velocity of content. You have to promote it. Once you get it going, it can get very viral, but just putting up a page, nobody's going to come. You have to get people to come to it. A lot of brands use coupons for it. We don't like that so much. It's okay, but it's impulse. We'd rather you advertise in a way that builds a story, and then when people come to your page, they see more stories, more social things, and then as you're doing your various posting through different channels, you build out stories that are around relationships, and so the advertising and promotion should fit that, but you have to do it or nobody will come. And you can do this pretty inexpensively because advertising on Facebook and Twitter is really inexpensive. It doesn't take a lot. And then just integrate your social media in your existing programs. Most large brands have huge marketing budgets, and if you integrate social media in your TV, in your print, on your product packaging for no extra cost, you will get a lot of people coming to your social media pages where you can then hold on to them and make it viral. And when I say integrate, I don't mean just put on a URL. Take the content from the users as the social media, put it in your ads, put it in your TV, put it on your packaging, their recipes, their quotes, and people like that. It's like reality TV on steroids. Number 8, the right tool for the right job. One of the things that we're all doing in the social media industry is a lot of RFPs, which procurement people drive. And we think, and let me just point out that my company is both a services company and a software company. So this is a CEO of a software company saying this. We think that companies spend too much time on software RFPs trying to get one tool that does everything for everybody. Big, long, complicated feature RFPs, because after all, wouldn't that be easy? But the reality is no one tool, nobody's tools, not my tools or anybody else's, will do everything for you. And we're all going to change them anyway in 6 to 18 months because technology moves quickly. So we think it would be much more effective to simplify these RFPs, assume you're going to get multiple tools, and you'll change them over every 6 to 12 months. And that will save a lot of time and money. It gets your teams in market, working with different tools, whether you're doing it yourself or your agencies are, and you want to have a portfolio of tools that keeps evolving based on your needs. And that will sort of refocus your efforts on the solution. So one thing you can do with your clients is when they go, oh, I need a tool or I want a tool, say, let's start with what we're trying to do here. What's the customer experience going to be? What's the marketing objective? What kinds of tools do we want? How many do we want? And let's not get stuck that one tool is going to solve our problems, because it really isn't the tool as much as it is what you do with it. Number 9, global scale, local relevance. Social media is getting pretty big. It's unifying customers around the world, and you can really standardize on a portfolio of tools, not one tool, and also on services in a global model that is consistent and leveraged, but you have to do it in a way that it can be tailored locally. And I'm going to give a case example on this in a little while, but for cost savings, volume discounts, leverage, time to market learning, you really want to set up a center of excellence that looks at what you can do and kind of standardizes platforms and services for everybody to use. But they have to be done so that each group around the world, whether it's a different brand, a different country, a different project, can tailor it to be locally relevant to their needs. Partly to be locally relevant, but also remember, social media is about dialogue and relationships with people. You need your local people, whether that's a brand, a store, or another country, to be involved. And for them to be involved, they have to have some, confidence about it and some influence over it. So it's very important that you give them a process flow and tools that they can tailor to their needs. But there's no reason to have everybody reinvent the wheel all around the world. And you could save literally millions of dollars by having a global program as long as it's designed to be locally relevant. And last, number 10, plan ahead for crisis. It's social media. Your customers are talking about you. It used to be that you could just broadcast out and control the messages. You can't anymore. They're in control of them. So you have to show up, because if you don't show up, the customers are there anyway, and you have to assume you're going to have problems. Every large brand in social media, and really small brands too, is going to have a crisis. It could be a customer with a legitimate complaint. It could be a customer who's just mad. It could be a competitor doing something you don't like. It could be an organized attack from a labor activist group or Greenpeace or something like that. And we deal with these across our clients literally every day. And the way to deal with the crisis is, number 1, have a plan before it occurs. Develop a social media crisis management plan, train people on it, identify stakeholders, develop responses for different issues you have, work with your legal department for what you need to can and can't say, and then with your social media experts in-house or an agency to tailor them so it's not legalese, because people don't like that. And when the crisis hits, you're ready to go. It's very important in a social media crisis that you react fast. You have to be thoughtful, but you want to be reacting that same day, not a day or 2 days or 3 days later, because it could spiral out of control. You want to know what you're going to do and who's going to be involved ahead of time. And you want people to know we're not going to treat this like traditional PR where we try to shut it down and control the message, because you can't do that. In a crisis on social media, you actually have to embrace the message and diffuse it. The second thing that you have to do ahead of time is develop that cultural model we talked about earlier, what your party is, and develop loyalists and brand advocates. Because in a crisis on social media, you can't really defend yourself. You can't argue with your attackers yourself. That'll just galvanize the attack and make you look bad. You really have to diffuse it and allow time for your brand loyalists, your brand defenders to emerge. The problem is, you don't really make friends in the middle of a crisis. You have to make them ahead of time. So all these other best practices about dialogue and relationship and culture and topic mix, you really have to have all that going so you have a community of loyal people who will come out and defend you when you handle the crisis correctly. So now I'm going to quickly go through 2 case studies that illustrate this. The first is EQ Stable, which is our client Zoetis, the largest animal drug company in the world, and how they use these practices for social brand identity and topic mix. So this was a new brand. They had spun off from Pfizer, and they had to establish the brand. They wanted to use social media to bring their premium care experience beyond what their sort of sales reps and business development people and account people could do for their high-end customers, and they want to grow and leverage engagement. And because their drugs are sold through veterinarians, they don't really have relationships with the end users, or rather the owners of the end users, because the horse relationship is sort of indirect too. So the first thing we did with them is we worked out who among their target markets they really focus on, because different people are reached in different ways through different social media channels. And after working it through, the main focus would be horse owners with a halo effect to people who owned ranches and breeders and handlers and things like that. And then we worked on what's their cultural model and what kind of a party they are. And it turns out that for horses and livestock in general, there's a big relationship with the horses, but also with the land and local community. So you really don't want to come off as a crazy party or something like that. You really have to have a lot of values that relate to kind of down home, down to earth, the land, the animals, really earthy things like that. Very social with other people that share that interest. So their party was a barbecue at the county fair. And we used that as a context to figure out all the programming. And then we brought people forward, very social, remember, talk not about yourself, but about social things. And this was easy because everybody loves horses. And here is Tina. Tina actually works at Zoetis, and she's very, very active on their page, talking about her love of horses and what she does. And then they have celebrity spokespeople. Here's Sam Elliott. But again, it's not Sam Elliott hawking the drugs or the pesticides. He's talking about horses and what they do. And then every so often, as you'll see on the right, they slip in a tip, a veterinarian tip, that leads you to something about the product. But it's all in the context of we all love horses. This has developed a community of people that actually know each other on Facebook and come back and have put up tons and tons of photos. All the photographs you see on this slide were submitted by their users and customers, not by the brand. And what happens with this is instead of an experience where it's a big faceless corporate brand hawking its products out them all the time, they've created an experience which shows these customers that Zoetis understands them. They understand horses, they love horses, they understand horse owners, they are horse owners. It's not Zoetis, it's Tina and Joe and Marion and Sam Elliott, all of whom love horses together. And who do you want to buy your products from? Somebody who understands me. And the ROI on this has been quite good. In just a month or two, they grew from 0 to 100,000 fans, which was the target, and they had an absolutely phenomenal 22% engagement rate, which is just almost unbelievable because for a small page of tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, we would never usually expect more than single digits. For many millions, it's a fraction of a percent. So for them to have 22%, and it's been staying there, is just unbelievable. And the other thing is, if you look down to the bottom, a key metric they had is they wanted to gather names of the end customers because they didn't have that. And they gathered quite a few names, and they found that this was the most cost-effective way to do it, coming in at a fraction of the price of the next most cost-effective way, which was search engine marketing. So they're expanding this program. We're doing some apps with them that connect the social media to the CRM systems so we can actually track sales, and they're bringing this forward to their other businesses like cats and dogs, each of whom will have a party that has Zoetis values in it, but it's a different kind of party for cat owners, dog owners, and horse owners. And now I'd like to go to our last case study, and then we'll have time for questions, which is a global CPG company and how you can scale the management of user content around the world. Now, the information I'm going to give you is based on actual clients that we have. It's a little bit of a composite because, we can't give out confidential information. And just to make that point, for the illustration, this fictitious news has just arrived. Every CPG company in the world has merged into one global fictitious company for the sake of this case study. And no, they're not all LiveWorld clients. So if you see your logo up here and you don't think you're one of our clients, don't feel bad. It's just a fictitious story to make the case. So let's look at what a typical community manager, social media group, legal and procurement are facing today in a large global company with many brands around the world. First off, you're all around the world and you have lots of brands, and this is the composite we put together. And then all these different brands are very busy on many different social channels, and they're not all the same channels. And in some countries like China, it would be a whole completely different set of channels. So you've got all these brands, and they all have different channel strategies, which is appropriate for them. And then you've got to deal with dozens and dozens of different languages. And then on top of that, if you're like most global companies, you have hundreds and hundreds of digital and PR agencies and so-called social agencies all around the world, each saying they can do this. And everybody is reinventing the wheel. There's no coordination, and there's no leverage. So we have clients like this, and we put together for them what we call a global moderation program. And this consists of a templated startup process that has saved 140 hours of work, cutting it down to 40. So it's 100 hours of savings right there of in-house and agency time, just getting the moderation going on a new Facebook page. And the way we did it is we laid out templates for each group to fill out. What are your objectives? Who's the target market for this page? What are your guidelines? Oh, by the way, are you following the corporate guidelines that, in our case, we developed with the corporation? Because not everybody even knows what they are. And those guidelines should follow a corporate level, but then be tailored locally, because each brand, each market segment, each country could be different. For example, in France, any programs you do around teen girls are much more tightly regulated by law than anywhere else in the world. You wouldn't have thought it was France, but it is France. Where in the Netherlands, pretty much anything goes. And you have to match your guidelines to each local situation while retaining kind of consistency with corporate values. What kind of content will there be? Audio, video? What's the topics? What's the timing? And what's the budget? Just by templating and streamlining this process, we were able to get people to market sooner and save 100 hours per page of work and billing. Next, in our case, we have a global platform that polls all the different pages and pulls the content in to a single integrated workflow where you can then scale its use and combine it for volume discounts and more efficiency reviewing it, which in turn enables us to share the labor across it. So even though it might be dozens or hundreds of social media pages and community websites, it all goes into an integrated workflow, so when we're moderating, we can share the hours. Here's an example. Let's say it's a big company, 10 brands. To keep it simple, we'll make it English in different countries. The risk profile of this country is it wants it checked every 4 hours. That's 6 times a day. That's 6 hours a day per brand times 10 brands is 60 hours. And this literally is what was going on in this client. Everything's separate, but I'm simplifying the example. So we came in and implemented what you see here on the screen. Instead of doing 60 hours for the 10 brands, we shared the moderation across them over 24 hours because it wasn't such huge volume that 24 hours couldn't handle it. So now it's an integrated workflow, and we're doing 24 hours of moderation instead of 60. So that's a 2/3 savings right there. But each brand is now getting 24 hours of coverage instead of 6 by just sharing the model. And the combination of the process flow and the tools allows us to put it all in one integrated workflow, but recognize what each different brand is doing so the moderation can be different for the different guidelines. So right there, 1/3 the cost, yet 4 times the coverage for each brand. And it saves these companies literally millions of dollars a year. So the benefits are, 1, lower cost. You get volume discounts. You're sharing the labor across brands. You have a streamlined process. 2, rapid time to market. We're not reinventing the wheel. It's streamlined. 3, you get a globally consistent program where it's needed globally, including global discounts, but still meeting the needs of each brand. And 4, because in this particular case, LiveWorld's doing all this work, the in-house community managers can focus on what they were hired for, which is strategy and content and actual engagement, and they can go home at night. Most global companies aren't planning for their community managers to work evenings and weekends and 24/7, so we're able to do that. And when they come back in Monday morning or the next day, we've listed out what are the things they need to look at. And last, and this is new, because you have a globally integrated program this way in social media, you have a global visibility into the local voice of customers around the world. And that's kind of leading edge. Our clients are just beginning to take advantage of it, but it's another advantage of doing this in an integrated way that you don't get when everybody's just doing their own thing. More of this is covered in a book that I've just released, the CMO Social Media Handbook. You can buy that on Amazon in the ebook or the hardcover, but I'm not here to sell the book. So if you go to our website, you can actually download the entire book free as a PDF and learn more about these things I've talked about today. And in the spirit of all that, of dialogue and relationships with social media, now we'll turn over to questions and have a discussion. And our question people will take questions now.
Yes, we've had quite a few questions coming in. So I'm going to start with this one because this one came in a few times. And that was, how do you protect your brand in social media?
Okay, well, the first thing to do is to recognize that you're in among your customers. They were always there. They were always talking about you. You just couldn't hear it or you didn't have to. So you have to participate, number one. Some people think, well, I just won't do anything. That doesn't work because the customers are there anyway. Second, you have to embrace issues because they can go elsewhere. Third, you have to really say, how am I going to create an environment that's consistent with our brand's values, kind of protecting it, and what my customers expect. And you have to moderate. You have to have a moderation program that's based on real guidelines that isn't trying to control people, but it's setting a nice environment. Publish guidelines, put them right up there. There's places on Facebook and your community websites where you can put guidelines, and then manage them and tell people what they are. Think of it as if you're in a park and your customers want to have a nice experience. They don't want to have a policeman sitting in their lap, but if a crazy person walks in or somebody starts screaming profanity or throwing pornography at them, they kind of like a policeman to come along and take them away. So you have to say, I'm creating an environment for my customers that is consistent with their expectations and true to our corporation's values. Proactively set up the guidelines, moderate it, and then the best thing is to build a cultural model like I've talked about so that your customers become part of it, and then they'll help you maintain the environment that you want.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Here's a really interesting question that's just come in. You said you've worked with different industries like CPG and pharma and retail and helping them to be more effective. What's the difference in their approaches to social media?
Well, each one varies. In pharma, you have, it's a very regulated industry, so is finance, and so you have to look at their needs. So in the pharma industry, you have to look at things like off-label discussions and adverse events escalation and develop your social media program and the moderation engagement, factoring that in. And the key thing to do is to map it to the processes the company already has so it fits into how they think and what they're doing. So pharma is very focused on, one, regulatory compliance and adverse events, and also a lot of education because people really need that healthcare information. They really want it. Finance is also a very compliance-oriented. Curiously enough, we find that finance is even more conservative than pharma, at least in the United States, which means we're all more worried about your money than your life, I guess. But you have to work with both of them that way. For CPG and retail, they actually overlap with those because on one end of the spectrum, they're selling financial services and products that you put inside yourself or on yourself. And then CPG companies can have a lot of, and retail have a lot of consumer sensitivity because there's, the CPG companies aren't usually directly in touch with their customers, but they're using their products and there's a lot of emotion around them. So sometimes you have to think about almost as if it's a regulated environment. A lot of image and lifestyle. Retailers, that's very real time. People are totally on top of their experience in your store, on their website today. So each has its differences, but every single one of them has to think about the on-page experience that I'm creating is what my customers will expect in-store or with my product. So whether you're a pharma brand like a Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson or a CPG or beverages like Coca-Cola or Procter & Gamble or a retailer like Walmart or an auto company, every single one of these, your customer is going to look at their experience of social media and say, if this is the experience the brand is giving me here, this is what it's going to be like when I go into their store, use their product, or use their service. So that model is important across all of them.
Great. Thanks again, Peter. And we've had a couple more questions come in. I'm going to go with this. You mentioned doing this all cost effectively. How do I know if we are doing it well or not? What are some of the symptoms of an inefficient in-house team or agency we should look for?
Okay, well, that's a really good question. And I would say the first thing is, if the program is being approached as if it's traditional marketing and it's broadcast, that's inefficient. And that's a tricky one because we're so used to that. We're so used to everything being a big graphical ad, you know, an award-winning TV commercial, that often our marketing people and our agencies want to do that in social media. And it's just not the most effective thing to do. So right there, if you see you have a very high production value program with little dialogue and conversation among the customers, you're pretty much throwing that money out the window. I'm not saying it has no effect and that there isn't a place for video and graphics, but it's not the core. And, you know, it's expensive stuff. So the first thing you want to look at is, am I building a program that is true to the context of social media? There's more about people talking to each other, or am I spending a lot of money on high production apps and ads and things that I'm just throwing at people? Now again, especially if there's anybody in our audience that does that kind of work, I'm not saying that's bad, but you got to look at it and say, where's the bulk of the money in the strategy? The second thing is, are the people who are doing this really focused and expert in social media? And we've had a really big land grab because, you know, it's big and it's new. And you can do this with outside people or inside people. There's the pros and cons, just like with TV or anything else you do. The important thing is that the people that are working on it are dedicated to it. They're not doing this while they're doing a digital interactive campaign. They're not doing it inside while they got 10 other things to do. Some of our largest clients, you know, they have a minimum that they won't put somebody on something unless they're half on it. I think that's a good idea. I mean, it would be better to have a quarter of a person than nobody to get started. But you really don't want this to be a part-time job. People have to focus on it. So you want an agency that has a dedicated expertise or practice in social media. You know, we do that, so we think the ones that are all social media are best. I suppose a really big one would be okay if somewhere inside they had a dedicated team that really did it and had experience in it. And inside, you want people that's their focus. So I think those are the two biggest things. You have to watch that you're not using traditional methods when you need to be social media true, and you want to have dedicated resources. And then I would say if every group in your company is starting from scratch and doing it over and doing it differently, you're wasting a lot of money. And what you have to do is say, listen, everybody, we're going to respect and support the individual needs of each group, but we can get together and do this with some scale, make it easier and more effective, lower your costs so you have more money to do it better.
Thanks, Peter. And I think I've got the last question here for you, which is, it sounds like you're pretty experienced. Those Zotis numbers were good. How do some of the brands balance software, in-house teams, and agency partners to deliver social media campaigns?
Well, number one, I think that the brand has to take ownership of the overall program and the integration. Now, anybody's got a social AOR RFP, please do send it to me. But ultimately, I think the brand is the social AOR. And, you know, with our clients, you know, we do a lot of it, and sometimes other people doing parts, but we always have to integrate with other agencies. And it works best when the brand basically takes an iron fist and says, everybody's going to play together and work together. And we like that because it makes a more successful program. So I think the number one thing you have to do is own it. Then number two, you have to have some people inside that are focused on this, not just rely wholly on outside people. And then I would say the most important thing is to have the best of breed for each item and be willing to change them as you go because it's such a rapidly evolving marketplace. Don't assume you should use the people or the tools you were already using, and just be flexible about it as you go.
Thanks, Peter. And I think that really brings us to the end. And I wanted to thank you for joining us today and giving us a fantastic presentation. And also thank everyone who joined us as well. You can hear more from LiveWorld at PecureCon for Digital Marketing Services, and that'll be taking place November 11th to 13th. That's at the JW Marriott Country Resort and Spa in San Antonio, Texas. And you can get more information on that at www.procurecondm.com. And as a final reminder, we will be sending you out the recorded webinar and slide deck. You can watch this again at your convenience. And thanks again to you, Peter.
Thanks so much, and I hope I'll see more of you, everybody at the ProcureCon conference. And if you're there and you have any questions about any of this, please just walk up and say hello. And if you don't have any questions, walk up and say hello anyway.
Thanks, everyone.